Hello, my name is Andrew. You can call me Cookies, and today we'll be going over the Quickstart Mythic Plus guide for Rest of Shaman. So jumping right into the talents, typically the first talent you're going to be taking is Unleash Life, though I would argue that all three of these talents are perfectly viable. Torrent's good if you want more single target burst healing. For things maybe like Grievous is like a good example. Undulation is good if you want again more single target focused healing, but with I guess more more like steady stream single target healing rather than something upfront and bursty like Torrent or Unleash Life. But Unleash Life generally gives the most amount of options to us, and that's why it's the best general choice. Also, it works with Chain Heal, which is absolutely ridiculous when you have High Tide. So the next row, you're pretty much always going to be taking Echo of Elements. You can run Earth Shield if you really want to play it safe with the tank, but Echo of Elements I strongly recommend because it allows us to do more damage, more healing, set up a little bit better if we run something like Cloudburst Totem, stuff like that. So Echo of Elements is usually the go-to. Next up, Spirit Wolf, Earth Grab, Static Charge, they're all good if you want more, if you need more stun CC or you're lacking CC in your group. Static Charge is really good to let you have your cap totem up more often. Earth Grab is really good to allow the tank to kite during weeks like Sanguine, or even like Grievous and stuff, just to kind of slow down the mobs. I'm just currently not running it just because it is a Sanguine week and it's not good to run during Sanguine for obvious reasons. And then Spirit Wolf is just good to help give yourself a little bit of damage reduction, just in general, depending on certain boss fights and stuff, but next up, we have Earthen Wall Totem is going to be your typical to go-to. This is a huge, actually like a really significant tank cooldown. Unfortunately, it mainly only works with Brewmaster Monks, like really significantly, but it's still good to run with other tanks. So generally, you just place it on the ground, and it's gonna, as long as the tank stands in it, it's gonna do a significant amount of shielding to them over the course of its duration. Other than that, you can take something like Ancestral Vigor if you want to play it a little more passively with your increasing people's HP in the entire group, or if Earthen Wall Totem just doesn't seem to be doing the trick, or you don't have a Brewmaster. That generally means that you play Ancestral Vigor. Just make sure you don't play Ancestral Vigor on Bursting and Grievous weeks, because it'll actually make healing those affixes a lot harder, because it'll make them do more damage since people have more HP, and it does percentage-based damage. Ancestral Protection Totem, you could find a use for it, but for the sake of this quick start guide, we're just going to stick with these two talents and not go too in depth on how to properly use this, because it's a little bit tricky of when to kind of determine when this can be useful. Next up, we have Graceful Spirit is usually the go-to just because it's going to help you move while casting, which on a lot of boss fights and certain mobs, there's going to be a lot of mobs that you need to move while casting in order to keep healing, otherwise you're just going to feel useless during that movement. But if you don't feel the need to take this during specific dungeons, you can take Nature's Guardian, which is a great backup option to just give you essentially like a little defensive when you get too low. Next up, we have Flash Flood and Cloudburst. Downpour is okay and it can be used, but typically we're going to go for Flash Flood or Cloudburst. Flash Flood is good when, I guess the best way to describe this is Flash Flood you take when you don't take Cloudburst. So Cloudburst is good for dungeons like, let's see, we have Temple of Sethralus, we have, it could be useful for something like King's Rest on Fortified, it could be useful on something like Atal Dazar just in general, Tyrannical or Fortified. It's essentially good for dungeons where you know when AoE damage is going to happen to the group and you can prepare for it ahead of time. So for instance, what I think from Atal Dazar is the second boss that you'll typically fight, he will do the constant AoE pulsing damage to the group, so you can prepare and set up for that and build up a Cloudburst that'll heal the whole group and top them off. Same thing in Temple of Sethralus. During Galv, it's really good because no one's ever going to be full HP on that fight. And then also on Fortified for things like we could say Waycrest Manor, where there's a lot of mobs that deal a lot of AoE damage or even single target damage to the tank, and you need to build up a Cloudburst to just release a bunch of healing. So then the next talent choice is basically High Tide as your go-to, because High Tide is absolutely ridiculous, especially if you have Unleashed Life. We build up to it, and then High Tide will essentially insta-top the group pretty much no matter the circumstances with an Unleashed Life. So it's just super, super, super nice anytime the group is going to be taking damage. Other than that, if you don't feel High Tide is useful, or you're having a hard time managing it, or you just don't like the talent or something like that, Ascendance is also a great option to go. Wellspring, not the best because it doesn't scale well with like a lower party size or anything. It's better for like raid groups and stuff like that. But even then, it's just like a lackluster talent right now, so Ascendance or High Tide are going to be your go-tos. And then again, if you're running High Tide, pretty much always go Unleash Life, but if you go down the Ascendant path, you can always go with like Torrent or Undulation, whichever one you like better. So that covers talents. Let's go over our Azerite really quick. So first off, there's essentially two different builds that you'll kind of play around with, and you can kind of mix and match them, but it really depends on the dungeon and the level of key you're doing. So for instance, I've been running some pretty low keys on this character just to kind of get them caught up with Raider IO, and obviously pugging as a Shaman is not the funnest thing to do. So I run Igneous Potential, I just triple stack it. So Igneous Potential just makes your Lava Burst deal extra damage, and you just have to go in Elemental spec in order to... Or actually, you don't have to go in Elemental spec, I lied, sorry. I'm too used to playing Priest. So this trait will just help you do a lot of extra damage, so if you're just purely going for damage and you're not worried about healing, you go the Igneous Potential route. And then the other typical route that a lot of people play is going to be something similar, not exactly, but similar to this, where you're going to run like 1 or 2 Igneous Potential, or even 0 if you just want to focus purely on healing. And then you'll run traits like Turn the Tide and Ancestral Resonance. Those are pretty much your 2 best traits, which the Ancestral Resonance is the one that buffs your heroism and gives you like a Mastery proc, which is super good for Mythic Plus. And then Turn the Tide buffs your Tidal Waves, which that's purely what we go for in Mythic Plus, is Tidal Waves efficiency. And then for our like next ring, Blood Siphon is pretty much what you're going to want on like all 3 pieces, but obviously you can work with other things if need be. So Turn the Tide, Ancestral Resonance, Igneous Potential are like your go-tos. And then if you don't want Igneous Potential and you need like filler traits that you, instead of like Turn the Tide and Ancestral Resonance that you don't have access to, you can run traits like... you can run traits that are essentially generic traits. So you can run things like, Unstable Catalyst is a good example, like this. Or things like Trade Winds, Insight the Pack, Blightborn Infusion, Swirling Sands, like things that, give you some kind of just generic stat proc that you get. And then also you can run Loyal to the End if your group is going to be running Loyal to the End. That's a great trait to run if every single person in your group is also going to have it. So that covers Azerite for the most part, and then we're going to go over essences. So we'll just go over what's good as a major essence first. So you have Crucible of Flame if you want to deal damage. You have Life Binders if it's something like Bursting or Grievous, where you need to like really focus on healing and you want like a nice 2-minute cooldown to just keep the group topped off during those moments. And then you have Memory of Lucid Dreams can be used for if you're mana starved. And also, I just would generally recommend this as a major to use if you're new to the spec or you're trying to get comfortable with it, because it's going to let you be a little bit more sloppy with your mana usage, and you won't get punished for it. So it's a nice essence to run as like a beginner, or again, if you need a lot of extra mana during like tough tyrannical bosses and stuff. Next up, we have Ever-Rising Tide is a great essence to run if you want like... If you know how to manage it properly and can utilize the burst healing from it. This would mainly be used for something like Bursting, where you can kind of prep the Ever-Rising Tide, get it ready, stack it up, stack a Cloudburst up, and then the Bursting starts proccing on the whole group, and then you have Ever-Rising Tide buffing your healing, and then you have a Cloudburst explode, and then like you're just essentially it's impossible to have the group die during that. And then Vision of Perfection is actually a good major to run. I see a lot of Shamans running it. Just having a reduced cooldown on Healing Tide is nice. It's not the greatest cooldown in the world, but being able to use it more is that's a benefit. And then also just the random procs can actually be super huge when they are used, because it'll just be extra healing added to the group or the tank or anything. And you can even proc off of your damage spells. So when you're doing like Igneous Potential builds, you'll just be proccing Healing Tides randomly. Other than that, the only real... essences that you can run besides that is Well of Existence as a major, and It's not the most useful essence as a major, and that's because Shaman is already so good at single target healing that Well of Existence doesn't really bring too much of a utility to us. So it's better served as like a minor essence to run. But if you feel the need more tank healing or single target burst healing, Well of Existence is a go-to for a major. And then for minors, we have Conflict and Strife is going to be a go-to for a minor. The versatility buff is really nice. We have Ever Rising Tide is pretty much the other go-to, and then Well of Existence. Those are pretty much going to be your 3 minors at all times that you can kind of shift around. Well of Existence is for if you just want raw healing output, and then Conflict and Strife is more if you want like aggressive, just for like more damage output essentially. Or even damage reduction from versatility, and then Ever Rising Tide is kind of like an always run as a minor, just because the proc on it is absolutely incredible and really good all the time. So other than that, stat priority is really just go for item level, but other than that, versatility is starting to come out on top, and then you have like crit and mastery, and then haste is kind of your worst stats. So other than that, just build item level, and then if you really want to get, you know, into the stats, then you can go for like versatility, crit, mastery, or versatility, mastery, crit, kind of like in that order. Next thing we're going to go over is a little clip really quick that I have from Resto Shaman, just to kind of show you guys the playstyle and how you should be looking to play Resto Shaman in general. This is a pretty low key I was running. It's just the 13 Temple. Again, I haven't been really running high keys. I'm currently like in the middle of a like faction swap and stuff, so I'm trying to find a team to run with. But anyways, let's just get to the clip because it doesn't matter. Here we're going to see this is Fortified Sanguine Quaking, and it's a 13 Temple, and this is where we do a pretty big pull with Lust. So the first major thing is, the number one thing to talk about when talking about Resto Shaman is utilizing the crazy amount of utility that they have, because they're so underrated in Mythic Plus, and they bring so much potential to what they can bring to help, you know, bring like a bad team comp to a pretty good spot, which honestly I think Shaman is probably one of the best like pug healers there is, even though they're the least accepted healer in pugs. So you can see as we start the pull, I drop a stun totem, which is completely wasted unfortunately because there's an Emissary of the Tides, and I didn't really realize it until after the pull started. So I should have saved that stun until after the Emissary died, but either way, we throw out our stun, Quaking happens, and what you can see I immediately do as we go into this pull is I just purge all these buffs off of these Faithless Tenders because it increases their damage done. So, not even worried about healing. I start by purging, and then I just throw down a Spirit Link to start topping people off, and this is where I just go into Chain Heal, Healing Wave, Healing Rain, things like that. It's just about gaining Tidal Surge stat or Tidal Wave stacks, and then using the Tidal Wave stacks on typically Healing Wave, and then Healing Surge if you really need to like get a fast heal out, but Healing Wave's your go-to. But you can see even here, like, let me rewind this a little bit because it's going pretty fast. Like, I'm interrupting that heal, I'm purging again, I'm looking for interrupts, I'm looking for stuns, I'm looking for things to do outside of healing, because that's how you essentially keep the group safe as a Resto Shaman. It's not just spam healing your heart out and doing a bunch of HPS, it's helping control and maintain the encounter that you're in by utilizing it, being the only healer with an interrupt, and also like pretty much a spammable purge besides Priest. So you can see even here I'm like doing a little bit of damage. They get hit by the breath, so now I go back into healing, and it's just weaving in and out of this playstyle of using Chain Heal and then using Healing Wave, using a Riptide, then using Healing Wave, using a Chain Heal and a Riptide, and then a Healing Wave. Like, it's just getting Tidal Surge stat or Tidal Wave stacks. My apologies for saying it incorrectly every time so far. Tidal Wave stacks, and then using the Tidal Wave stacks to benefit your Healing Wave spells. So you never want to like Healing Wave or Healing Surge without a Tidal Waves. Like, you'll see a lot of shamans, they'll just spam Healing Surge on a target when they're dying. That's not going to help at all. It is literally more efficient to press Riptide and then Healing Surge or Healing Wave. Even though you might go, well, Riptide doesn't do any healing and like upfront and healing, but it's going to be essentially faster and be a way bigger heal when you use that Tidal Surge proc. I did it again, didn't I? Tidal Waves proc. So that's the idea of Resto Shaman, and hopefully that kind of helps out with everything. And I think that's it for this video. So come drop by the Discord. The link's in the description, and come hang out, ask questions, let me know what you want to see for the next video. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.